Thank you for joining us for today's conversation, how to leverage UX design to improve SEO performance. My name is Daniel Anzueto. I welcome all pronouns, and I serve as a community engagement manager at Startout. I'm excited to welcome you to today's event. If this is your first time attending one of our workshops, welcome. I know that Startout's mission is to increase opportunity and success for LGBTQ+ entrepreneurs. I'm grateful to welcome back our host for today's session, Ryan Ward from Rex Marketing and CX. The floor is yours, Ryan.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Danny. And thanks everyone for attending. Today we'll be talking about UX design and how to leverage UX for improving your SEO performance on your website. So just to give a little background about myself, I'm based in Austin. I'm a two-time founder. Previously was the founder of an ed tech startup, exited in 2021, and I'm now the co-founder of Rex Marketing CX. I focus in the areas of growth marketing and SEO. Come from the healthcare and education space, but have again, we work with a number of different industries. So not just this isn't just specific to healthcare and education, but that's my background. In terms of what we do at Rex Marketing CX, we focus mainly with early stage startups and early stage companies. We focus in the areas of SEO, content marketing, content strategy, design, development, whether it be for landing pages or your full website, marketing ops. And given the fact we work with early stage companies, services start as low as $300, depending on what we're doing. Um, but yeah, that's just a little bit about context about us. But to jump into the content for today, so what we're looking at first is just what is the relationship between UX and SEO, and why you should care about it. Going to be looking at just key UX components and things to consider, core web vitals and core web vital reporting, mobile responsiveness, navigation and structure, readability in your content on your website, accessibility, and then some practical tips and tools to help you as you take this information with you for your business. So first off, how do SEO and UX connect? So why does this matter, and why should you care about the UX of your website? So SEO is all about getting users to your website organically, and then UX helps keeps them engaged on your website. So think about SEO is what brings them there, and if you got to think if you have a bad experience on the website, people are going to leave. People aren't going to engage with your content or your product on the website, and they're going to bounce from the page. Google and search engines in general track user engagement metrics on your website. So think about your click-through rate, if people are sticking on the website, how long people are staying on the website. These are all things that are being tracked and monitored behind the scenes that do have an impact on your organic performance. And we'll talk more about that of the role they play and which metrics make the biggest difference. But just keep that in mind of if people are having a poor experience on your website, it's going to negatively impact your SEO performance for your brand. So overall, just think of having a better UX for your website. It's going to help improve your rankings over time. Because I like to say, like at the end of the day, Google is in the business of providing a good user experience to its users. So you got to think if people are conducting a search and they're getting taken to a page at the top of search results, that is a poor page experience or a poor quality website. Um, that's creating a poor user experience for Google's user. So at the end of the day, Google is trying to ensure that the websites they're driving traffic to and that they're showing in their search results are ticking the boxes and meeting the criteria they have in place uh, to provide a good experience for the searcher. So the UX signals that I'd say um, are the ones you should definitely be keeping an eye on and have a bigger impact on your SEO performance are first your bounce rate. So your bounce rate is a metric or data point of how quickly people are coming to the page and bouncing off of it immediately. So I like to say like the question that this is answering is, do people find what they expect? Are they being taken to a page that provides the information they're searching for? Are they being taken to a brand that they're the correct type of brand they're searching for? Um, you got to think if you're doing your own search, if you bounce from a page, you're probably clicking on a page that you did by accident, or you immediately go to the page and you're like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was, or this wasn't the information I was looking for. So that's how bounce rate comes into play. The time on page. So again, similar to bounce rate, but a bit different of how long are people actually sticking onto that page. So that's an indicator of high quality content or informational content. So, for example, if someone's coming to a blog post, are they staying through and reading the full piece of content? And the question this is really answering is the page valuable? So if the page is valuable, if people are finding it high quality, they're going to stick on the page, they're going to read through the content. Um, than if the page was low value or low quality content. Um, Pages per session. So this is pretty straightforward, but how often are people going through and viewing multiple pages on your website? So is there other related valuable content on your website? That's an indicator of your website being high quality in the eyes of Google. So one thing that that can help with this, and we'll talk about a little bit later, but thinking about, are we linking internally to related blog content, related products? Um, are we making it easy for someone to navigate the website, to go to other pages, to explore further? These are the questions you should be asking yourself when you're thinking about improving these metrics. And then finally, returning visitors. So again, this is pretty straightforward in terms of what it is, but how often are people coming back to your website? So are people regularly engaging with your brand? Are people like coming to your brand for regular updates, whether it be in your industry or product updates or the products you're selling, whatever the case it may be? How often are people coming back and engaging with your brand? Um, so these are the key metrics that I'd say to keep in mind and have a pulse on. Um, and we'll talk about where you can gather this information, this data. But these all have an impact on your SEO performance in the long run. So again, I said this earlier, but having a strong UX improves your SEO and improves these metrics to have positive engagement signals. Um, so looking into the components of UX, so we're going to go into each of these in deeper detail, but think of these as like a puzzle piece, and they're all fitting together and playing their role. But the main things to consider and have a pulse on are your site speed, or you having an understanding of your core web vitals, your mobile responsiveness. This is probably goes without saying, but you need to make sure your website is mobile responsive, and we'll talk about that further. But having clear navigation and structure on your pages and on your website overall, keeping your readability in mind and the design of your content and your pages, and then finally meeting accessibility standards. These are all the components that you really should be keeping an eye on if you're wanting to improve your UX to ultimately improve your organic performance. So getting into core web vitals or your site speed. So the things you want to be reviewing on core web vitals, and first off, I guess to talk about core web vitals, if you've never heard of this, um, what core web vitals are is it's the metrics that Google's measuring to determine how technically sound your website is or your website pages are. There's different metrics that are measured, but the ones that I want to call out here today is your LCP or your largest contentful paint. This relates to your page load speed. So, and we're not going to dive through necessarily how to improve all of these today because that's a deeper conversation and is dependent on the style of your website and how it's laid out. But things to consider with if you have a slow LCP or it's taking a long time for the page to load, that can be related to images you have in your header, file types like image file types, can be related to video, any sort of like large pieces of data that are loading on the initial page load, any images that are not lazy loaded. So if you're not familiar with lazy loading an image will actually delay the image loading until it's scrolled to on the page. So these are just some different techniques that you can evaluate and take a look at if you are having a poor LCP score. Um, but have a pulse on your LCP and improve that to improve your site speed. Your first input delay. This relates to interactivity. So how quickly can someone click on a page, click on a button, whatever the case may be. Truthfully, I rarely see issues with this for a website. However, if you have a slow loading time, this can hurt your your first input delay. Because if your page is loading slowly, people can't interact with it quickly. Um, so we want to have an idea and make sure that you're passing FID or your first input delay as well in your core web vitals, and then cumulative layout shift. So this relates to visual stability. And when it comes to page loads, all this happens most of the time without us visually seeing it. When you when you load a website, usually just will all render at once and you're good to go. And you don't really see what's happening behind the scenes with the website. But if you have a poor if cumulative layout shift score, this can relate to you not properly sizing images. So if you were to use Google Chrome, and you ever use the inspect tool within Google Chrome, and if you're not familiar with that, you can right click and click to inspect a page. You can then within the sidebar actually go through your page load millisecond by millisecond to see how things shift or change on the page. So for example, if you're not properly sizing an image and it's pushing another image, this is happening within milliseconds, but if it's pushing other elements around on the page whenever the page is rendering, that's going to hurt your cumulative layout shift score, and ultimately hurt your core web vitals. So, um, again, if you're checking your core web vitals and you have any of these in the red zone of how it shows in the core web vitals uh, tracking UI, you'd want to go ahead and do a deeper dive into these and look at how you can improve these for your website. Because by improving these, you're going to ultimately improve your user experience and your SEO performance. So looking at mobile responsiveness. So when it comes to mobile responsiveness, first thing to call out is I'm sure we all know this, but the majority of searches happen on a mobile phone. I believe the metric is around like 75% or a little less than 75% of searches happen on mobile. So if your website is not optimized for mobile, you're providing a poor user experience for those who are on a mobile device. Um, I will say too, and this is goes without saying, and regardless of your SEO performance, every website should be mobile responsive. If you aren't, you're behind the curve. So make sure that if you haven't gone through and actually reviewed the mobile version of your website, take the time to do that and ensure that you're meeting those criteria. And one thing that people don't often aren't aware of is that when Google indexes websites for search, so when they're going through and determining, hey, where should this page fall in search results? Should it be at the top of the page, second page, fifth page, whatever the case may be, Google determines that from your mobile site. So you could have the most beautiful desktop version of your website and a poor version of your of the mobile version of your website, and Google's only taking into account the mobile version. So that's something to also think about too. I've sometimes seen with businesses and clients where they'll have different versions of layouts where some text will be hidden, some text will show, depending on if it's a mobile version of a site or a desktop version of a site. So keep that in mind too as you're thinking about the text and the content as well, that only the text that's being shown on the mobile version of your website is what's actually being crawled and actually being indexed by Google. Um, so some things to think about when it comes to mobile friendly design: simplifying your menus, your drop downs, making sure buttons are the right size. I often see this too, where if your button is too small on mobile, that would actually be dinged in the eyes of Google because it's not mobile friendly if the button is too small for someone to engage with it. So these are just things to consider and think about. But again, mobile responsiveness should go without saying nowadays, but it does have a large impact on your SEO performance. So if you haven't taken the time to look at this and review it for your own website, you definitely need to after our call today. Looking at navigation and structure. So when it comes to how people navigate your website, we want to make it as intuitive as possible. So, you know, you don't want to have 8 different drop downs with your content poorly organized. Um, that's creating a poor experience for the user. For example, if someone's on a blog post, you should make it easy for someone to find other related content, find other blog posts that might interest them. Um, so keeping all that in mind, I always like to say when you think about SEO and like optimizing for UX and just performance, think about if someone was to go to a page on your website and this was the complete first interaction they've ever had with your brand. They've never seen your homepage, they've never seen any of your products, they've never seen any of your other pages. They've maybe just found one of your blog posts that's ranking in search. They come to that and, they see that content. How are you going to help them understand your brand? How are you going to help them navigate and encourage them to navigate to other pages? Um, Always keep that thought in the back of your head of this is the first interaction I'm potentially having with someone. If someone was to follow on this page, how can I optimize it for them to go to other pages or what have you? And depending on what website builder you're using, like WordPress or Webflow or something like that, your blog pages, and I'm speaking about blog pages specifically, but these like product pages or blog pages, they're typically templates. So think about, hey, if this is a templated page, how can I improve the template? How can I, make an impact across all of my pieces of content, across all of my product pages, whatever the case may be, to encourage engagement and help them navigate across the website. So jumping into what I have here, so I mentioned this earlier, but intuitive menus, make sure that you're really thinking strategically about what are the headers on my menu, what are the items that fall underneath these headers. If someone was searching for, say, we'll use like an e-commerce store, for example. If someone's searching for, uh, you know, maybe conditioner, like maybe you're selling hair care products and your headers are shampoo, tools, maybe you know, something else or sprays, something like that. If someone's searching for conditioner, where would that fall? Like make sure that it's very easy that if someone's coming to your website and they're looking for a specific product, they're going to very easily know where it falls in the hierarchy of your categories. Um, Make sure you're leveraging internal linking as well. So, and this is like regardless of UX experience, just from an SEO perspective and improving your SEO performance, internal linking is a must. Um, by linking internally, like within your blog post or product pages or your home page, whatever the case may be, you're providing more opportunities for users as well as Google crawlers to find those pieces of content and to find uh, those pages you're linking to internally. From a user perspective, it's also helping someone find related content and to delve a bit deeper into your brand or the topic they're reading about or whatever the case may be. So make sure that you're leveraging the internal linking. Like I said, this could be an example of linking internally within the blog post. It could be having a suggested other readings. I'm sure we've all seen this. At the end of a post, you might see other related posts that someone could go through and read. If you're on a product page, you might see links to other products that pair with that product or that are related to that product. If you're on a home page, you might see links to additional landing pages for more information about the brand or, featured products or whatever the case may be. But you want to make sure that you're thinking about internal linking as part of your strategy, not only from like a UX perspective, but from an SEO perspective. One other thing to call out is breadcrumbs can be extremely helpful for users and improve user flow. So I'm sure we hopefully have all seen breadcrumbs to some capacity, but breadcrumbs is a visual of the hierarchy that someone navigated through to get to the current page. So say for example, again, we'll use an e-commerce store as an example, and we'll use the hair care products. Um, the breadcrumbs could look like uh, home, or it could look like shampoos, um, you know, men's men's shampoos and the shampoo name that you're currently on, men's shampoo Y. And then at the top of the page, that hierarchy, that path that someone followed to get to the current page will be shown at the top. That's what breadcrumbs that's what breadcrumbs is. So if you were to implement breadcrumbs on your page or on your website, it's going to help someone navigate. So if they were, maybe they came across your men's shampoo Y, or men's shampoo blue, or whatever the case may be through organic search, maybe they see your product and they're like, oh, I want to see what other products they have. By having breadcrumbs at the top, they're able to easily navigate to the next category up, which would be men's shampoos in this example. So, for e-commerce stores especially, highly recommend using breadcrumbs. It's not necessary for every type of company or every type of brand. Um, for if you have content and categories of content, it can be helpful for that. Um, but again, this is something to consider and how you can impact and improve the navigation on your website. Another thing to call out too that I often see is that if you have a lot of pages or a lot of content on your website, usually you want to go with a mega menu versus a drop down. So I'm sure we all may have witnessed a mega menu, but didn't know that's what it was. We all have seen a drop down at some point. But a mega menu would be if you were to click on an item in your main header and a larger area pops down that has everything organized. So if you were to, click on content and then within content, a larger rectangle pops up or whatever shape it might be, that has videos, blogs, and then categories or other items underneath those headers. So that's a mega menu versus a drop down. And again, if you're a website that has you know a lot of products or a lot of content or what have you, mega menus are usually the way to go. If you're a newer brand, you're not going to have enough content usually to have a mega menu, but maybe you might. But again, mega menus are another great way to help with navigation, improve navigation versus having the drop downs. So when it comes to readability and content, um, first off, when people come to your website organically, you want to make sure it's easy for them to digest the content and understand it. One thing to talk about, and we'll go a bit deeper into heading structure in the next slide, but you want to make sure that you have clear hierarchy for someone to understand how does this content read? How do I understand what's being talked about? So you want to make sure you have an H1 heading or the main heading at the top of your content, at the top of your page. Have H2s that break out into subtopics or sub items that need to be talked about. Using bullet points. All of these are items that improve readability for your content and makes it more digestible. I often think too, again, going back to what I said earlier, always keep in mind that Google is taking into account your mobile version of your website. So, if you posted a longer piece of a long form content or a longer blog post or, your homepage, whatever it might be, make sure you analyze it from the mobile version. So understand like, is this copy cluttered? Is there not enough spacing? Is someone going to actually go through and read this 10 sentence paragraph? That those are all things to ask yourself. And obviously, as a strategy, bullet points can be super helpful for someone to scan through, get the main topics of what's being said, and not have to scroll through pages and pages of content. Um, Additionally, make sure you're utilizing white space. By creating space, you're going to help reduce the feeling of overwhelm. If someone, and I'm sure we may have all had this experience, but if you're on your phone and you're doing a search and you go to a page that has a bunch of text, I sometimes will just be like, okay, this is too much. I'm gonna find something that's a little bit easier to digest, or that I don't have time to read through all this moment in time. So, to keep that in mind, just from your own experience, by creating more space, like visually on the page, you're going to let your content breathe, you're going to reduce clutter, and you're going to keep people onto the page. And all this ties into one another, just to specifically call out, like talking about bounce rate, like we did back a few slides back. If you don't utilize white space and people do get overwhelmed, and people navigate to the page and then bounce away, that's going to hurt your bounce rate. It's going to overall hurt your performance. Um, so all this ties in together. All this can have an impact on these different metrics that are being measured by Google for your organic performance. Um, Additionally, utilizing multimedia, whether it be images, videos, whatever the case it might be, that helps people stay on the page for longer. Um, so, if someone's going through your page, they see an image, they'll take time to look at it. A video, they might take time to watch it. That's going to lower your bounce rate. It's going to increase your dwell time on the page. So people are going to stay there longer, and it's going to have a positive impact on those metrics that are being tracked. Um, Another thing to call out specifically with the video is that I'll sometimes see if you maybe you're a brand that does video content, maybe you do webinars or you do short form video or long form video, whatever the case might be. Um, if you post that on your website, don't just put a embedded link to your video or just embed the video on the page with nothing else. I often find that and see that, and it's a big mistake. I like to also always like to remind people that Google is a text first search engine. So when people are doing search, they're for the most part doing their search within the text portion of Google, and they're looking to find text to answer a question or to guide them in a decision. If you just have a page with just an image or a video with no text or context alongside it, it's first off not going to rank organically because there's no text on the page that can be crawled by Google. Google is not going to watch that video and crawl that video and index it based off of things that are said in the video. That's just not how it works. So if you're thinking about, if you leverage video content specifically for your website or your content strategy, make sure your some strategies could be like incorporating your transcript of the video, like copying and pasting that onto the page so that Google can actually crawl that text. Maybe creating supplemental content that accompanies your video and having that text on the page. But anyway, overall, just make sure that you have content and text on the page if you're wanting it to actually rank. Um, and then I mentioned this earlier, like with the bullet points, but think about making your content scannable. So, general rule of thumb is that when it comes to paragraphs, keep it about 3 lines, 4 lines, generally 3 to 4 lines generally for paragraphs, so that they can be easily scanned on a mobile phone. Wouldn't go beyond that. And when I say lines, think about that experience on mobile. So if someone comes to a paragraph that's like 10 lines long, uh, it's very, unless someone's trying to do a deep dive into a topic, it's going to be a lot for them to scroll through and they're more likely to bounce away and not fully read the content. So think about your text blocks and keeping them smaller and keeping the mobile readers in mind as you're writing your content, as you're optimizing your pages for UX and performance. Um, So I mentioned heading structure. I want to do a bit deeper dive into this because this webinar has been meant to be a bit more of a beginner level topic, and I want to make sure that if you're just getting into SEO and just optimizing your website for performance, that someone's told you this and that you've gotten this information at some point, because I often see this as an issue for websites that are early, or you're a founder and you made the website yourself, or whatever the case may be. So headers and content structure are extremely important, not only from a UX perspective, but from an like overall SEO perspective, from an accessibility perspective. They they make a large impact on a number of areas of your website. So I have this screenshot here on the right that talks about the heading structures, or just shows visually the heading structures. So you have your heading one, and if you know any HTML, this is an H1 tag, or an H2 tag, H3 tag. Um, if you're using a visual builder, they're going to usually have options of like a drop down of like this is an H1, this is an H2, this is an H3. But anyway, when it comes to your headings, H1 tags, these are the titles of the page, the main ideas of the page. Every page should have only one H1 heading on the page. Um, that's just a general rule of thumb. I will say that that is the rule of thumb to follow in 99.9% of cases. There are rare cases where you'd want to include more than one H1 tag, but again, you generally speaking do not want to have more than one H1 tag on a page. Again, that's the title, the main idea, your company name, like on your homepage, it should be your company name or your brand name, whatever the case may be, but every page should have just strictly one. Um, you want to make sure that you're following this proper heading hierarchy at all times on all pages of your website. So whether it be blog content, your homepage, landing pages, this is the heading structure you need to follow in all cases. To give you an idea of like where you would use these. So your heading one is your main topic, your main idea or title for the page. Your heading two would be a subheading. So maybe there's another topic that you want to, well, sorry, just to backtrack too. You want to make sure that you might think, oh, I don't need subheadings or, um, I don't need to incorporate those into my content. Having subheadings makes your content uh, more digestible and improves the readability of the page. So you definitely want to make sure you're incorporating subheadings to some extent within your content and within your pages. Um, so heading two would be again like the next layer down from that title. So a subheading of maybe a section that you're speaking more specifically about in the content or the page. Your heading three would be a subheading underneath that subheading. So maybe there's a call out for go a bit deeper on that topic. And that's kind of how this follows. If you were to go deeper on a piece of information from heading three, it would then be header four. If you were to go deeper on a topic that's mentioned in header four, you go into heading five, so on and so forth. But the way that the structure works is that, say, for example, you have your heading one, your heading twos, which are your subtopics, and maybe within one of your heading twos, you have a sub topic, which would be heading three. After you complete that information within heading three, and you were to continue the piece, you'd go back up to the next higher heading, so heading two. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about this in the structure of your page, to where your subheadings are the heading twos. If you're going deeper, they're underneath that. But you go back to a heading two for like if you're continuing the piece and having more topics underneath the H1. Um, Hopefully that makes sense. But that's the structure that you would follow for headings. Um, and by incorporating headings, you're helping Google better understand your pages. When you're thinking about, and we're not going to talk about like a deep dive into keyword strategy today, but these are opportunities to incorporate your keywords into your headings as well. So any keywords that you're wanting to rank for, that you're wanting to show up for, you can incorporate those into the headings to improve your performance for those terms in organic search. Um, but these are very important to again, not only your UX of the website so that people can easily follow your content and understand your content, but also from an accessibility standpoint. When someone's using a screen reader, for example, if they have a visual impairment or a visual disability and they use a screen reader to navigate online, if you don't have proper heading structure, it makes it difficult for screen readers to properly understand and relay your content to someone on a screen reader. So again, these play into a number of factors for your website. So definitely come back to this topic if you're not familiar with it. Make sure you have a handle on it and make sure you follow this proper heading structure. So moving into accessibility, so we talked a bit about it, but when it comes to accessibility, um, there's a number of things to consider. I like to say again, going back to what I said at the beginning of the presentation, Google's in the business of providing a positive UX experience and a positive experience for their users, which is the searcher. Um, that being said, Google wants to ensure that regardless of someone's disability, they can come onto their product, Google search, and have a positive experience and be able to engage with the product. Um, keeping that in mind, Google is less likely to provide a website that is not accessible for all individuals who are using the website, using the internet, high in search results. So if you haven't thought about accessibility for your website, or your website's not passing accessibility standards, Google is less likely to show you in search results because they don't want to create a bad experience for the searcher, the Google searcher who is maybe using a screen reader or has a visual impairment. Um, so that's why it's so important to think about accessibility for your website, especially if you're wanting to improve your SEO performance. The main things to call out first off is alt text for images. I will say this is like the number one thing that I see people not do or do incorrectly or forget about is not incorporating alt text for the images they're using. Um, Actually, I was talking with a client couple months back, and we were helping them with their website. And he told me, he was like, "Oh, I saw the alt text field and I just didn't know what to put." And I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna leave it blank because I don't know what I'm supposed to put there." Um, I hear that more common than not. So if you're again self-managing your website or just getting started, make sure you're thinking about alt text and incorporating it into the images. Um, this is a great place to also incorporate keywords in your alt text because those can have an impact on your organic performance. But you don't want to just stuff a bunch of keywords into the alt text for your images. Think about if someone is, using a screen reader and they can't visually see the image and they're going to see the text. What should that text be? If it's someone who's wearing, like, if it's a person who's in a sweater, you can say, woman wearing black sweater. For example, you don't want to just like stuff a bunch of keywords in there because it's not going to make sense or logical sense to someone who's using a screen reader. Um, Also look at utilizing ARIA labels. So ARIA labels help screen readers. To give you an example of like how this label comes into play, I'm sure we've all seen this, but if you have a pop-up that has an X on it for someone to close out of the pop-up, or you know whatever it might be. Maybe you have a button with just an icon. Maybe it's a button with a magnifying glass for search. Um, if you haven't properly set up ARIA labels for that button, a person using the screen reader isn't going to be able to engage with that button or understand how to use it. So in like the HTML code, it looks something like this with if you had a button, it would be button, ARIA label, close menu. This is what's going to be shown to someone using a screen reader so that they understand what does this do? How do I engage with it? And again, this is providing a better experience for that individual. Um, Additionally, you want to think about font size and contrast of colors to improve the usability of your website. So, I'll sometimes see this too, where someone will say, "Oh, this is my color palette for my brand. These are the colors I decided. I just like these colors. Um, yeah, that's why I chose them," which is totally fine to do and totally great to do for your brand. But you want to make sure that if you're having those images, if you're using that color as background colors, or you're putting those colors on top of one another, that there is sufficient contrast to ensure that someone can easily read the text, easily see the outlines of a button or whatever the case may be. Because if you haven't kept that in mind, you're going to fail contrast standards for colors. Sorry, one second. And then additionally, keeping in mind font size. So again, going back to what I said earlier, we want to think about mobile font size. So it's pretty standard, but you shouldn't use the same font sizes that you're using on desktop that you're using on mobile. Desktop, you have more area, you have more space to play around with, so your font sizes can be bigger. When you think about um, mobile design, you don't want your heading to be huge and take up the whole page. That's going to create a poor user experience. On the flip side, You don't want your text to be too small. So if your text is too small and not readable by someone on a mobile phone, you're hurting the usability of your website. So these are all things that are taken into consideration when Google's analyzing your website and determining your rankings. Want to recommend too, there's a website, WebAIM they have a free tool that you can use to check your color contrast. So you just put in the hex codes for those two colors and it will actually tell you if it's going to pass accessibility standards. So if you have a color palette that you created yourself, or someone who's not like professional at this and doesn't understand accessibility or has not thought about this before, I'd highly recommend going to that tool and just inputting the hex codes and determining if it's going to pass standards. So again, just to reiterate, Google's in the business of providing a positive user experience. So if you aren't creating an accessible website, your pages aren't accessible, it's going to hurt your UX and overall hurt your SEO performance. So I know we've talked about a lot of topics here and a lot of things to explore, but just want to finish with some practical tools and tips for, you're like, okay, I just got this information, but now how do I run with it? What do I do next? When it comes to optimizing for SEO, keep the UX and SEO together in your mind. They play highly. I'd say that UX has a high impact on your SEO performance. So if you're not doing one without the other, you're not fully optimizing your website. Don't silo those two areas of your business of your website. I also highly recommend you looking at heat maps. So there's a number of software tools out there where you can actually look at heat maps for people who are visiting your site and looking at the analytics of where people are engaging or not engaging. So if you're not familiar, a heat map will actually visually show you where people are navigating on your web page or on your website and what they're clicking on or not clicking on. So there, if you don't have a software like this in place, you can often be like a shot in the dark of like, oh, someone came to my website, but they didn't do anything. Like, why didn't they do anything? A heat map can answer a lot of those questions by showing you, oh, they came to the website, they hovered over this image, they tried to click on it, but nothing happened. Or they tried to click on this button, but what they expected didn't happen. Um, whatever the case may be, it's going to help answer a lot of those questions that you maybe don't have enough information on, or that you're kind of just taking a guess on. And it can help you understand those friction points from the user experience side of things. You also want to make sure you're testing your site speed regularly. I will say, if you're not updating your website often, once you are kind of in a good place with site speed, it's not necessarily gonna deteriorate over time. But if your website is changing regularly, producing new content, new pages, adding videos, images, changing images, introducing videos, whatever the case may be, those can have a negative impact on your site speed. So you want to make sure that you're having a regular audit or test to ensure you're passing standards from Google's perspective. You also want to ensure that your content and your design is optimized for not only humans, the people who are actually going to be coming to your website, learning about your brand, hopefully engaging, booking a call, buying a product, reading your content. But you also want to make sure it's optimized for Google crawlers. So bots who are going to be coming to your website and crawling the content. And those things aren't mutually exclusive. Like there's a lot of overlap by optimizing for humans and bots, like heading structures that we talked about, accessibility standards, ARIA labels, all of that. Um, but you want to make sure that you're aligning for both of those and keeping both of those in mind. So when it comes to your toolbox, so to speak, of the tools you should be using, in my opinion. So a number of these are free, some of them are not, some of them are paid. But first off, you should make sure you're using Google Analytics if you're not already. Google Analytics is an extremely insightful tool that can help you gather more data on your users, your traffic data. So back to what I mentioned earlier around understanding your bounce rate, your dwell time, How many people are navigating to multiple pages on your website when they visit it. Um, all that data can be captured and reviewed and tracked within Google Analytics. If you don't have it already, definitely recommend doing that after our call today. It's free to use, pretty straightforward to set up. They have a setup wizard within their UI that's extremely easy. So really no excuse if you don't have it. You really should have that if you're wanting to understand your web traffic and your SEO performance and improve it. Um, Google Search Console, again, this is a free tool that's part of Google's product suite. Again, if you're on this call, you're obviously thinking about SEO for your business. Um, so you need to make sure you have Google Search Console installed. It's a standard, free to use, and this is what Google's going to, this is where you can actually go through and report and see how are you performing organically. Are you, how much, what search terms are you showing for organically? Which pages are generating the most traffic organically? Um, so if you're wanting to prioritize SEO and actually incorporate this into your strategy, make sure you have Google Search Console set up. Um, Again, they have their own setup wizard within Google Search Console, so it makes it pretty straightforward. It's even if you're not technical, you can take care of this and do it within, minutes to get this set up. Um, Page speed insights. So this is another free tool to use within Google's product suite. This is very simple. You input your URL. You don't even need to set up an account for page speed insights. Your page speed insights, it's basically just a free online tool. You go in, you put your URL, you run a quick audit of the web page or the website, and it's going to give you an understanding of your technical performance. So the things that I called out earlier, your LCP, your large contentful paint, all those different things we talked about earlier, this is where you're going to go to and find information to make sure you're passing all those standards. And if you need to improve them, it actually has some pretty helpful information of, if you're failing LCP, what are some things that impact that and how can you improve it? So highly recommend using that as well. If you don't have a grasp and understanding of how your page is performing from a technical performance right now. When it comes to heat maps, which I had mentioned earlier, a couple tools that I recommend that I've used personally, Hotjar, Crazy Egg. Those are very straightforward tools. They can be very helpful if you want to start incorporating heat maps into your data reporting. It's going to help you understand friction points, understand how you can improve the UX of your website, um, and in turn improve your SEO performance. And then finally, SEMrush or Ahrefs. These are both great tools. Have used both personally. Highly recommend them. Um, Ahrefs and SEMrush. Ahrefs and SEMrush are like the gold standards when it comes to SEO tooling, in my opinion. So, if you're on this call today and you're wanting to make SEO a priority for your website and part of your overarching marketing strategy, I would highly recommend investing time and energy into evaluating these tools and adopting one of them. There's other tools out there. This is just my recommendation to these two tools to look at, but there's other tools out there you can evaluate. But having one of these placed, I really say is a must if SEO is part of your overarching marketing strategy. They're going to provide tools and features that help you do a deeper analysis of your organic performance and your SEO performance, and help you in a more easier fashion regularly report on what's working, what's not working for your website. So this is like I'd say like standard of tools that I'd recommend for your toolkit. If you don't have these already, like 3 of these 5 are free to use. So really no excuses there. And there's a number of options for heat mapping and SEO tooling. So would definitely recommend checking these out and incorporating something like this into your toolkit or your tech stack. So that's all I had for today. Hopefully this is helpful. And yeah, happy to answer any questions people have.
Fantastic, Ryan. Thank you so much as always. I do know, Justin, you had a question originally around certain targets that are healthy, but I can't remember which slide it was about if you want to jump on.
Yeah, I was just curious, like what are benchmarks for some of those early KPIs that you mentioned around I guess abandon rate, or I forget what each of them were. Bounce rate, time on page.
Yeah, for sure. Great question. I think I would say it depends on the company and the product, obviously. If there's I'd say a general rule of thumb, like I'd say if your bounce rate is I'd say higher. Again, it depends on the company, but first up, number of pages that someone visits, I'd say more than two. Like that sounds very small, but if you're having people visit less than two, less than three pages, that's a signal that your internal linking strategy needs to be strengthened. So when it comes to number of pages to visit, that's what I'd say to keep in mind. When it comes to dwell time, again, this sounds maybe small, but I'd say if you're keeping people on the page for 30 seconds or more, that's a good indicator that you have high quality content. Um, so I'd say keep that in mind for your content. Obviously, if you have, that's going to depend on if you have long form content. Like if you're a brand that has a lot of long form content, I'd say you probably want to aim for a little bit longer than that if you have a lot of that. If you're a page that has no blog content, and you're just like products, like you just have product pages, it might be a bit slower than that. But I'd say a general rule of thumb, just like for any art overarching brand, shoot for about that in terms of 30 seconds. Because there'll be times when I'll jump into somebody's account and it's like their dwell time is 5 seconds. That's a high indicator of like poor quality content or driving traffic that's not relevant. Um, so again, yeah, that's what I'd recommend in some of those metrics. But it just kind of depends on, your content strategy, the brand, what are you selling? Um, yeah,
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. I also dropped in the chat for everybody a link for feedback. Please share your feedback on this session and things that we want to bring for future sessions, as well as a Google Doc that has links to all of the sessions that we have hosted with Ryan and Rex Marketing and CX, and then links to the upcoming ones, including one tomorrow and then some in November. So please take a few minutes, check that out. Really helpful resources. But Ryan, as always, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. Highly recommend that you all book a call with Ryan to talk about your SEO needs, and make sure to join us for our upcoming workshops.
awesome. Thank y'all.
Thank you all. Have a great day.